The MCU is the best superhero franchise of all time, no doubt about it. And that's thanks to the incredible blockbuster movies Marvel has delivered over the past 16 years. I won't lie, not all of them were perfect, but the majority? Absolutely fantastic. And some? Well, they're more than just great, they're iconic and timeless. So, I gave myself a mission. Out of the 34 MCU films, I'm picking the top 10 best. It's a dangerous task, I know, but here I go. By the end of the video, I want you to comment your top 10 list to see if our lists match. Number 10. Black Panther. I know that some people might think it should be ranked higher, but let me explain why this spot makes sense while still giving it the recognition it deserves. First off, Black Panther is more than just a superhero movie. It's a cultural milestone. When this movie came out, it was a global event. The representation it brought to the MCU was groundbreaking. The world building was phenomenal, and Wakanda instantly became one of the coolest locations in the MCU. The blend of futuristic tech and deep cultural heritage gave it a unique identity that made it stand out from anything we'd seen before in Marvel. T'Challa wasn't just a superhero. He was a king, grappling with the weight of leadership and the legacy of his father. His journey in the film wasn't just about beating the bad guy, but about finding his place as both a leader and a protector of his people. Boseman's performance was powerful, and he gave the character the dignity and depth that made T'Challa unforgettable. And let's not forget Killmonger, one of the MCU's best villains. Michael B. Jordan brought intensity to the role, and what made Killmonger so compelling was that you could understand where he was coming from. His motives were rooted in real-world issues, and he challenged T'Challa not just physically, but ideologically. That moral conflict elevated the movie beyond the typical superhero formula. Now, why does it land at number 10 and not higher? The simple answer is because in my humble opinion, all the other movies on the list are simply better. While Black Panther is undeniably great, there are other MCU films that push the envelope in different ways. Whether through jaw-dropping action, game-changing plot twists, or sheer emotional weight. The pacing in Black Panther slows down a bit in the middle, and while the third act is thrilling, it falls into the more standard CGI-heavy battle that we've seen in other superhero films. But make no mistake, it's a movie that not only entertained but made an impact on pop culture. So, while it sits at number 10, it absolutely deserves to be on this list for all the right reasons. Number 9. Avengers Age of Ultron. Age of Ultron often gets overshadowed by the first Avengers and Infinity War, but it's a crucial movie that brings the Avengers closer together while also pushing them apart in ways we didn't expect. The reason it ranks so high is because it sets up so many important pieces for the future of the MCU. We get deeper character development, and that's something not every MCU film nails as well as this one does. Every Avenger is forced to confront their inner fears, thanks to Wanda's mind games. Now, let's talk about Ultron. He might not be on the same level as Thanos, but he's still a pretty compelling villain. Sure, he's not a perfect villain, but his creation and the consequences of his actions ripple through the entire MCU. Without Ultron, we don't get Civil War, Vision, or even the divided Avengers we see later on. One of the best things about Age of Ultron is the introduction of two key characters, Wanda Maximoff and Vision. These two characters alone set Age of Ultron apart from other MCU movies that don't introduce anyone quite as important. The action sequences in this movie are also insane. The opening scene in Sokovia? It's like the Avengers in their prime, working as a well-oiled machine. But the final battle, where they're defending the city from Ultron's army, is next-level epic. We get to see how far each character has come since the first Avengers movie, and there's this sense of growth within the team that's hard to ignore. And Thor's hammer scene? When everyone tries to lift Mjolnir and Cap makes it budge just a little, that's foreshadowing at its finest. Age of Ultron is the movie that begins to fracture the Avengers. The seeds of mistrust are planted here, especially between Tony and Steve, which leads directly to Civil War. While the other films are great in their own right, they don't carry the same weight when it comes to shaping the MCU's overall direction. And obviously, this was one of the most enjoyable movies in the entire MCU. The number 9 spot is totally deserved. Number 8. Doctor Strange. Now, this movie might not have the huge ensemble cast like Infinity War or Endgame, but what it brings to the table is something totally unique and visually mind-blowing. If you think about it, this film introduced us to a whole new side of the Marvel Universe. Magic, alternate dimensions, and the concept of the multiverse. Before Doctor Strange, the MCU was mostly grounded in science fiction or tech, but this movie, it opened the door to the mystical, and it did so in a way that felt fresh and exciting. One of the reasons Doctor Strange deserves to be above other MCU films is because of its visual style. I mean, come on, those mind-bending sequences with buildings twisting, the mirror dimension, and the astral projection scenes were unlike anything we'd ever seen in a Marvel movie. All the other Marvel movies are great in their own ways, but they don't push the boundaries of the MCU quite like Doctor Strange does. This film expands the MCU's world building by introducing us to the concept of the multiverse, something that becomes incredibly important later on. It also gives us a hero who isn't just about physical strength. Doctor Strange uses his mind, strategy, and knowledge of the mystical arts to overcome challenges. It's a movie that balances stunning visuals with deep philosophical themes about time, loss, and destiny. The introduction of magic and the multiverse gave the MCU a fresh, exciting direction that had a lasting impact on the rest of the franchise. That's why Doctor Strange holds the 8th spot on my list, and why it deserves to be ranked above the films that follow. Number 7. Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok is a game-changer for the Thor franchise. Up until this point, Thor's films had been solid, but Ragnarok completely reinvented the character and tone. Taika Waititi's direction brought this wild, fresh energy that the franchise was missing. He took what could have been a typical superhero story and turned it into this colorful, hilarious, and epic space adventure. It was a total tonal shift for Thor, and it worked. The humor is a huge part of why Ragnarok ranks so high. We're talking laugh-out-loud moments from start to finish. The humor doesn't take away from the stakes or the emotional beats, though. It's a perfect balance. Thor's banter with Loki, his dynamic with Hulk, and even the ridiculous moments like "get help" all work because they fit this new version of Thor we're seeing. And Thor definitely had some badass moments. The scene when he taps into his lightning powers during the fight on the Rainbow Bridge? Simply epic. And we can't talk about Ragnarok without mentioning the villain, Hela. Cate Blanchett absolutely crushed it as Hela, the goddess of death. She's ruthless, powerful, and her backstory gives the plot some real emotional weight. She's not just another villain. She's Thor's sister, which adds this deep family dynamic to the story. Plus, she's got some of the best action sequences in the MCU, like when she destroys Mjolnir with just one hand or wipes out Asgard's army in seconds. Not to mention the movie is a feast for the eyes, with its neon colors, wild alien landscapes, and epic battle scenes. Sakaar is definitely one of the coolest settings we've seen in the MCU. It's a movie that balances humor, action, and heart, while completely reinventing its main character and setting up the epic events of Infinity War. For all those reasons, Thor Ragnarok absolutely deserves its number 7 spot. And you? Do you have Thor Ragnarok on your list? Number 6. The Avengers. First of all, The Avengers is where the MCU truly became a cinematic universe. This was the movie that brought all of our favorite heroes together for the first time, and honestly, it changed the game for superhero movies. Before this, we had solo films, but The Avengers was the payoff. We had been waiting for these characters to share the screen, and when it finally happened, it was epic. Seeing Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye team up for the first time? That was a moment in cinematic history. No one had ever pulled off something on this scale before. The chemistry between the characters is fantastic, especially during the scenes where they clash. And let's not forget about the action. The final battle in New York is still one of the best set pieces in the MCU. Watching the Avengers fight off Loki's Chitauri army across the city is pure adrenaline. And the iconic shot of the team standing together in a circle? Instant classic. That's the kind of moment that gives you chills. Speaking of Loki, he's a big reason why The Avengers deserves its spot at number 6. Tom Hiddleston gave us one of the MCU's most charismatic and memorable villains. He's got depth, charm, and a personal connection to Thor, which makes his role as the antagonist even more compelling. What sets The Avengers apart from the movies below it is the sheer ambition and execution. It could have easily been a disaster, trying to juggle so many big personalities and storylines. But instead, it was a triumph. This movie set the gold standard for team-up films, not just in the MCU but in the entire superhero genre. Without The Avengers, the MCU wouldn't have become what it is today. In conclusion, The Avengers deserves its number 6 spot because it did something no other movie had done before. It successfully brought together multiple iconic heroes into one film, and it did it with style. If you haven't watched it in a while, trust me, it still is incredible as you remember. Number 5. Deadpool and Wolverine. I know what you're thinking. How is it possible that this movie is already in my top 10? Listen, I get it. But this movie was just that good. The movie starts off in the best possible way. The opening scene of this movie is possibly the best opening scene of all MCU movies. Deadpool truly gave us a show. And seeing Deadpool and Wolverine fight each other and then fight together? That's literally a dream come true. And the fight scenes in this movie are amazing, like Winter Soldier level good. Okay, the villain wasn't anything special, but the moments this movie gave us? Few MCU films have managed to do that. I don't even need to mention the comedy, because this was by far the funniest Marvel movie, and yet it didn't take away from the weight of the more serious scenes. I admit I might be a little biased about this movie since it's still fresh, and I'm really hyped about it. Plus, Wolverine is my second favorite Marvel character of all time. So you can imagine how happy I am to see him on the big screen again, especially in the MCU. But even so, there wasn't much more you could ask from this movie. I got Deadpool joking with Kevin Feige. Even Henry Cavill and Chris Evans made an appearance. We also got that iconic fight scene between Wolverine and the Hulk. You'll have to excuse me, but this movie definitely deserves a spot on this list. Number 4. Captain America Winter Soldier. Alright, so let's talk about Captain America Winter Soldier, because this movie? It's easily number 4 on my list of the best MCU films, and I feel like I don't have to do much explaining. Seriously, if you haven't watched it in a while, or somehow missed it, you need to go back and check it out. First off, the action is just on another level. You remember that elevator fight, right? I mean, Steve Rogers taking down a whole squad of Hydra agents in close quarters? That's the kind of scene that gets your heart racing. The choreography in this movie feels so raw and intense, like you're right there in the middle of it. It's not all flashy CGI. There's a weight to the punches. The fights feel real. But what really makes The Winter Soldier so good is that it's not just your standard superhero movie. It's like a political thriller wrapped in a superhero package. You've got this whole storyline about government surveillance, trust issues, and how much control we should really give up for safety. It's deeper than most of the MCU movies, and I think that's why it sticks with people. And remember, this isn't just an isolated story. The events in The Winter Soldier flipped the MCU upside down. Hydra infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D.? That was a huge deal, and it changed the direction of the whole franchise. The impact is still felt in later movies, so it's not just another chapter, it's a turning point. Honestly, The Winter Soldier is the full package. The action, the depth, the characters, and the way it changed the MCU. It totally deserves that number 4 spot on my list. If you haven't rewatched it in a while, go grab some popcorn and do it. Trust me, it still holds up. Number 3. SpiderMan No Way Home. I know some people love this movie and some have some issues with it because of some of its plot holes. But for me, there's no doubt. This was one of my best cinematic experiences ever. First off, this movie isn't just a Spider-Man film. It's a celebration of everything we love about the character. We're talking 3 generations of Spider-Man coming together, and it delivers on a level that no one thought possible. No Way Home took our nostalgia and flipped it into something fresh and exciting, making it one of the most ambitious and emotional MCU films to date. The main reason this movie ranks so high is the way it brings together Tom Holland's Peter Parker with Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's versions of Spider-Man. Seeing all 3 interact, share wisdom, and fight side by side was the kind of fan service moment that somehow felt earned. It wasn't just thrown in for shock value. It was a deep, emotional payoff for fans who followed these characters for years. Now, I have to talk about Tom Holland's performance. This was easily his best performance as Peter Parker. He's grappling with the consequences of his decisions, and we see him truly come into his own as Spider-Man. The movie pushes him into a darker, more mature space, especially after the loss of Aunt May, which was one of the most gut-wrenching moments in the MCU. Another reason No Way Home deserves its spot is because of the villains. I mean, come on. Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin? Alfred Molina as Doc Ock? These guys came back and didn't miss a beat. Dafoe especially was terrifying, and he brought that same menace from 2002 Spider-Man but somehow made it even more intense. The fight scenes between Peter and Goblin were brutal, emotional, and felt personal in a way that Spider-Man fights haven't felt in a long time. The movie easily could have been a movie that just rode the wave of fan service, but it didn't. It gave us new layers to Peter's character, while also giving closure to Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man. So why does it sit above movies like Black Panther or Winter Soldier? Nostalgia being the main reason. But also because while those movies are amazing, No Way Home gave us something truly rare. It managed to unite different eras of superhero movies into a cohesive, heartfelt, and action-packed story. For that, No Way Home absolutely earns the number 3 spot on my list. Number 2. Avengers Endgame. Honestly, Endgame could have been number 1 because it's just that good. But here we are, giving it the well-deserved second spot. Endgame, it's not just a movie, it's an event. The biggest event in cinema history. It's the conclusion to an epic 11-year journey that brought together dozens of characters, storylines, and emotional moments into one massive cinematic experience. After the devastation of Infinity War, we were all wondering how the Avengers could possibly recover from the snap. The way Endgame tackles that, by showing the heroes dealing with loss, regret, and failure, is something we rarely see in superhero films. We watch them struggle, mourn, and come to terms with the fact that they've lost. And then, of course, we get the time heist. This was pure genius, revisiting iconic moments from previous MCU movies while allowing our heroes to fix their mistakes. Plus, who didn't love seeing Cap fight Cap, or Tony Stark getting that moment of closure with his father? And the final arc of the movie was when the movie went to a completely different level from all the other MCU movies. That final battle was something completely mind-blowing. When you think about epic battles in superhero movies, nothing comes close to the showdown in Endgame. The moment when Cap wields Mjolnir, that's straight up legendary. And when all the portals open and every hero from the past 10 years shows up, literal chills. It's pure cinema, and the energy in the theater during that scene was electric. The payoff for years of build-up was beyond satisfying. But what truly makes Endgame special is how it wraps up the arcs of some of our favorite characters. Tony Stark's sacrifice, man, that hit hard. He's the character that started the MCU, and his heroic end was both heartbreaking and fitting. "I am Iron Man" is an unforgettable line, and it closed the chapter on one of the MCU's most important figures. And let's talk about Cap's ending. He got to live the life he always wanted, finally getting his dance with Peggy. It was the perfect send-off for his character. So yeah, Endgame deserves the number 2 spot because it's more than just a movie. It's a payoff for over a decade of storytelling. It's epic in every sense of the word, filled with jaw-dropping moments, heart-wrenching emotions, and some of the best character arcs in the MCU. Number 1. Infinity War. I feel like I shouldn't even have to justify Infinity War's spot on this list. If you've seen it, you know this is Marvel at its peak. This was the culmination of 10 years of storytelling. Everything we had been watching and following, from Iron Man to Guardians of the Galaxy, led to this massive event, and it did not disappoint. First off, Thanos. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how Infinity War gave us one of the best villains, not just in the MCU, but in movie history? And let's not forget, Infinity War was the first time we got to see all these different characters finally come together. Seeing Thor with the Guardians, Doctor Strange teaming up with Spider-Man and Iron Man, these were the team-ups we've been dreaming about, and they all delivered. From the opening scene where Thanos just wrecks the Hulk, you know this is going to be different. There's no time to breathe because every scene feels urgent, and the stakes are higher than ever. And that snap, I mean, come on. That was hands down the most shocking and devastating moment in the entire MCU. We were sitting there in disbelief as characters like Spider-Man, Black Panther, and even half the Avengers just turned to dust. No one was safe, and the MCU had never felt so unpredictable. We got those insane battle scenes, like Thor arriving in Wakanda with Stormbreaker, which is easily one of the most hype moments ever. But the movie also hit you right in the feels. Gamera's death? That was heartbreaking. And Peter Parker's "I don't feel so good" moment? Man, that was gut-wrenching. And to top it all off, the movie ends with Thanos sitting peacefully after wiping out half the universe. It was haunting. We were used to the heroes winning, but Infinity War flipped that expectation upside down. The bad guy actually won. So yeah, Infinity War deserves the top spot because it's everything we love about the MCU. Epic battles, unforgettable characters, emotional stakes, and a villain that completely changes the game. It's the kind of movie that stays with you long after the credits roll, and honestly, it's going to be tough for any other MCU film to top it. Now it's your turn. Do you agree with my list? I am excited to know your top 10 MCU movies so far. And if you want to know who are the top 5 strongest Avengers in the MCU, you just need to click in the video that's showing up right now.